Okay, good afternoon, boys and girls. So for the next 2 weeks, we're going to have a little look at cereals. So it's a new chapter for us. And we're also going to have a little look at pastry. Okay, right, so let's start off with our cereals PowerPoint. So you can see here at the front of the screen, here we have our raw cereals here as they're grown in the ground. So there we have wheat. Okay, and wheat is one cereal that's used to make breakfast cereals such as Weetabix. Okay, it's used to make breads, it's used to make pasta. A type of wheat called durum wheat is used to make pasta. And then we have other cereals. So we have rye and barley and oats, and they're just to name a few. Okay, and they're all used to make different products, such as breakfast cereals and lots of different things. Okay, so we're going to start off with the learning outcomes here for the chapter, and you'll have these on your sheet. So having a look at the types of cereals available, and when we talk about cereals, we're not necessarily speaking about breakfast cereals, but we're talking about the raw cereal, the wheat, the oats, the barley, the rye, the maize or corn. And they can be used to make breakfast cereals. We're going to look at the cereal grain, the nutritive and dietetic value of cereals, buying and storing cereals, the types of wheat, how it's processed to make a product, and then the types of flour, which is the main product that we have from wheat is flour, and we use flour to make lots of different things. So cereals are the grains of cultivated grasses. They form the major part of carbohydrate in our diet, providing 1/3 of energy. Okay, so here we go to the types of cereal. So we have wheat. So this is what your wheat grain looks like here. And then it's used to make flour, first of all, and then the flour is used to make bread. Okay, we have wholemeal flour where the whole lot of the grain is used, and that is all the goodness. And then we have white flour, which is processed. The goodness is removed and the white flour is left. Wheat is also used to make pasta and breakfast cereals such as Weetabix. Now moving on to oats. So oats is another cereal, and oats are used to make biscuits such as oat cakes. Okay, we also have porridge here. Oats are used to make porridge, and then that feeds into things like granola, where you would use porridge oats as part of that. Now let's move on to maize, and another word for maize is corn. So it's used to make corn on the cob, corn oil, breakfast cereals such as corn flakes and popcorn. And we also have corn flour, which is used to thicken. And celiacs can use corn flour to thicken their foods because there is no gluten in it. And gluten is a protein found in wheat and some other cereals. And celiacs have an intolerance to it. So they have to be careful what foods they eat, because wheat flour is the main flour used in Ireland, and it's used in a lot of things like processed foods and sausages and puddings and things like that. So if you are a celiac, you have to be very careful. So you can thicken with corn flour. Anybody can, but particularly celiacs, it's useful. So rice is another cereal. So rice, we've lots of different types of rices that we can buy in the shops. And then breakfast cereals such as Rice Krispies, rice flour, okay, rice vinegar, rice cakes. Barley is another cereal, and it's used to make barley water, okay, or barley drinks. It's used to make beer, okay, it's fermented to make beer. Then we have rye, and rye is another breakfast cereal, and it's used to make crackers like Ryvita crackers, rye flour. And then we have like pumpernickel bread. It's like a German bread. It's very dark, and it's made using rye flour. Now let's move on to the structure of the wheat grain. So this is what our wheat grain looks like, and you need to know this oval shape, you need to know how to draw it, and you need to know how to label it accurately. So the outer layer is called the bran, and that has a lot of fibre in it. It's very, very good for you. The inside layer is called the endosperm, and it's very starchy and it's not as good for you. And then we have this little part down here, which is only 2% of the whole grain. It's the germ, and it's very nutritious. It has a good type of fat in it, polyunsaturated fat. It has vitamin E. It's very, very good. The scutellum then surrounds the germ layer, and then the alurone is just underneath the bran. Okay? Now, so looking at each of those parts, the bran layer is 14%, and it has fibre or cellulose, vitamin B, iron, calcium, phosphorus. And it's removed when you're processing cereals. So if you're making white flour, the bran is gone. And the bran can be sold separately, and it can be used to make breakfast cereals such as bran flakes. Endosperm is 84%, so most of the grain is endosperm, and it has a lot of starch in it, and gluten, that little protein that celiacs have an intolerance to, and B vitamins. Okay, the outer layer of it is called the alurone, so it's between the endosperm and the bran. And the germ then is 2%, it's very nutritious, and it has good fat. It has vitamin B and E, and vitamin E is fat soluble, so that's why it is found where the fat is, and iron. Okay, now the composition, so the percentages. So we have 7 to 15% protein, and it's low biological value. We have 2 to 7% fat, and it's polyunsaturated fat. We have carbohydrates, which is mainly starch and fibre, B vitamins, calcium and iron, and 12% water. Now the nutritional value, so let's have a quick look at that. So going through each nutrient, we have low biological value protein, and gluten is the main protein in wheat and rye. Fat found in the germ, and it's polyunsaturated. It's very, very good for you and good for people who are on a low-fat diet. We have carbohydrate, starch and cellulose, and another word for cellulose is fibre. Vitamins B, 1, B2 and niacin, and vitamin E. Minerals, calcium and iron, and then quite a small amount of water. Now the dietetic value, so whose diet and why? So whose diet is it useful for and why? Well, a good proportion of starch for energy for all groups, particularly young people who are energetic and teenagers. Fibre in all diets. Good to help prevent constipation, good for elderly people who are not as mobile and more prone to constipation, but good for everybody to help our digestive system. B vitamins, calcium and iron, so calcium for the bones and iron for the blood, and B vitamins for general good health. Fat is unsaturated, so it does not contribute to cholesterol buildup, and a good source of essential fatty acids, so great for people who are on low-fat, low-cholesterol diets. Inexpensive and versatile, cannot be digested by celiacs, so we need to be careful of that. And phytates, which are chemicals found in cereals, inhibit the absorption. That means stop the absorption of calcium and iron, so we just need to be aware of that when we are eating cereals. Now, buying and storing. So you can read through these yourselves. It's all fairly straightforward. So make sure that the package is not opened when you buy it, and use within the recommended time, and store in a cool, dry place. Now, before we move on to the milling of wheat, we're going to look at the types of wheat. There is spring wheat and there is winter wheat. Now, spring wheat is sown in March and harvested in September, and it's grown in climates with cold winters and warm summers, such as North America, and it has a very high gluten content. Now, winter wheat is sown in autumn and harvested in late summer, so this is more suitable to our climate, okay, England and Ireland, and it has a lower gluten content. Now, let's move on to the milling, okay? So the effects of milling. Okay, so the milling is on a separate sheet, and as we read through, as we read through that, I'll let you to read through that yourselves. It goes through the process of starting with the whole wheat grain. And as it's ground down to make wholemeal flour, that contains the whole grain. Then further on during the process, you will see where the bran is removed and can be sold separately. The germ is removed and can be sold separately, and they can be used to make homemade brown bread. And then the endosperm is the only part that's used to make your white flour. So it's much more refined and processed. A lot of that goodness has been removed. Okay, so the effects of processing. Wholemeal or whole grain flour has more protein than white, as the alurone layer and the germ are removed in the production of white flour. White flour is deficient, that means has no fibre and has a greater amount of starch. Okay, a greater proportion of starch than whole grain. It has a greater percentage. As the germ is removed in the production of white flour, no fat remains, and that means it lasts longer. Okay? Right, so let's have a look at the effects of heat on cereals. So what happens when you heat cereals? Moist heat causes the starch grains to swell and burst and absorb the liquid, such as in a rice pudding. Dry heat causes the starch grains to swell and burst and absorb the fat, for example, when you're making pastry or popcorn. Cellulose, which is the fibre, or the outer layer, is softened. Starch becomes more digestible. Protein coagulates and causes the bread or cake to set. And heat can cause some loss of B vitamins. Now, types of flours. So if you look here, we have whole wheat flour, okay. And we also have stone ground flour, which is like wholemeal flour, only it is ground using between stones rather than metal rollers. Now, we also have brown flour, which is a little bit less fibre in it than wholemeal flour would have. And then we would have our white flour. So we can have cream flour or plain flour that has no raising agent in it. And then self-raising flour is the same as white flour or cream flour, but it has a raising agent in it. Now, breakfast cereals. Right, wide variety of breakfast cereals made from a range of cereal grains. Okay, they can be puffed, shredded or flaked, and they can have other things added to them. So we have to be careful and watchful what ingredients are added to these breakfast cereals. How much sugar is added? Are they sugar coated? Are they not? Do they have honey added to them? Do they have fruit or dried fruit added? Nuts? So we have to be very careful of the nutritional value. Now, pasta is made from a durum wheat. It's mixed with water, it's shaped and dried. Sometimes egg is added. Brown pasta is made from the wholemeal flour. Green pasta has spinach added. Red pasta has a tomato puree added, and black has squid ink added. So there are the different types of pasta. Now looking at rice then, last of all, rice is a cereal in itself. It's grown mostly in the Far East, okay, and rice products include Rice Krispies, rice flour, rice cakes, rice paper, rice wine, and ground rice. Now look at the different types or varieties of rice. Now the one that you're probably most familiar here with is long grain rice, used in savoury dishes like curries. But you can also buy medium grained rice or arborio rice used in a risotto. Pudding or pearl rice is short grain and is quite round, used in a rice pudding. Then we have basmati rice, which can be used in the same way as long grain rice. Treated rice is like your Uncle Ben's boil in the bag. It has been pre-treated, so it doesn't take long to cook. And brown rice is the most nutritious rice, the most fibre in it. Now brown rice, traditional brown rice, takes about 40 minutes to cook. But if you buy the brown rice boil in the bag, it will only take 10 minutes because it has been pre-treated. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed our little PowerPoint on cereals. Please use your textbook to reinforce what we have learned in this chapter and then write in your notes. Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.